Welcome back to another episode of The Creative Psychotherapist. Thanks so much for your continued listenership and tuning in each week. We're really excited to have you here with us. Um, if you haven't already, please rate, like, subscribe, give us some feedback so that we can continue to improve and share meaningful information and interviews with you that, you know, pique your interest and meet your needs. You can do that anywhere you listen to the podcast, or you can send us an email directly with feedback to creativeclinician@gmail.com. I'm excited to share this next episode with guest Tanya Cole-Lesnick, and she is a licensed clinical social worker based in New York. And she is coming back into private practice after spending a lot of time outside the realm of private practice. And she shares how she's been building community by really putting herself out there using video and things like TikTok and on Instagram to grow her practice, which is focused on group therapy. So I hope you enjoy the interview.
The Creative Psychotherapist is the official podcast of the Creative Clinicians Corner, a practice-building resource for creative psychotherapists. TCP Podcast is the cast for creative, expressive, and experiential-focused psychotherapists curious to learn how to design, build, and scale a thriving private practice. Your host, Raina Lombardi, interviews successful therapists about the tools and strategies they have used to develop creative, focused practices. They also talk about the products, services, and side hustles they have developed using their knowledge and creativity to enhance their therapy practices, make a greater impact in their communities, and diversify their income streams. Welcome. Now here's your host, Raina Lombardi.
Thanks for listening to the Creative Psychotherapist podcast. I'm your host, Raina Lombardi, and I am very excited to welcome my next guest. Her name is Tanya Cole-Lesnick, and she's been a psychotherapist and licensed clinical social worker and coach since 1995. She received her master's degree in social work from New York University after group therapy changed her life. She has extensive experience in outpatient hospital mental health, private practice, and wellness center settings. From those experiences over the years, she has identified her most important focus, helping people to live lives that light them up. She does this by helping clients to access and honor their truth, to change habits that don't serve them, and to heal faulty narratives so that they are living in alignment inside and out. Her work revolves around intimate groups as the sharing of inner worlds and being human together in a safe space is what she finds to be the most powerful way for lives to transform. Welcome, Tanya. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for our conversation.
I am too. So I guess let's start about with your personal story of group therapy and how that was transformative for you. It led you to a second career as a psychotherapist, but also is really informing where you are currently and how you're building out your practice.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I was in my 20s, I had really longed for a long term love relationship, and it wasn't happening for me in the way that I wanted. So that kind of opened me up to the idea of therapy, although I hesitated for a while to even consider it because at the time, I mean, I think it was 1990 actually. And so it was a long time ago, and it was in New York City where therapy was probably the most accepted. But I felt a lot of stigma connected to it. And I thought it was really only for people who had real problems. And I wasn't really identifying
Mhm.
myself as that. So it was a complicated opening up process. When I did finally decide that I was going to try it, I asked my parents for names because they had actually seen a couples counselor. I knew that. And they got me a name of a therapist and started. And it was a lovely sort of experience immediately because I felt really heard and seen, and it felt
Mhm.
safe. But this therapist suggested I add group therapy to the mix, which terrified me. And but I said yes because I trusted her, and it was intriguing, even though it was terrifying.
Mhm.
So I went, and I was a graphic designer at the time. That was my first career. So I was a graphic designer. I had this experience, and it changed my life. It allowed me to start to realize that some of the things that I thought were flaws were
Mhm.
actually just part of the human experience. And I was able to
Mm.
see through hearing other people's stories and seeing other people react to me, but also to them, to each other. And most of these people I really admired. So there was something very freeing about letting go of this story that I had, that there were flaws that were keeping me unlovable, because of course that's why I first went, and starting to connect to myself in a deeper way. I started to feel more confident just
Mhm.
in my life. And from that, I people started to gravitate towards me in a way I hadn't experienced before. And I met my husband around that time. So he and I have been married. It'll be 30 years at our next anniversary. And
Congratulations.
yeah. And then I made a decision to go back to school and become a therapist because I felt such meaning about living from this very real, true place that was deeper inside. And so from the start, my goal was I want to create groups like these that I
Mhm.
can offer to clients. So I started on that journey.
Excellent. And so I think you brought up some really salient points of, well, group therapy can be really intimidating for many people, for a variety of reasons. And I think that kind of filters into therapists who are wanting to offer group therapy in private practice, that even creating a group and having it become filled and successful can be intimidating. And I know your practice integrates groups. What are you doing to, um, I don't want to say overcome the barrier, but like work with that barrier and still be able to call in people to fill those groups in your practice?
Yeah, it's a big question, really, because I very recently am transitioning into a new practice for myself, with group being the cornerstone of the work that I'm doing, but in the process of growing that. So it's been tricky. I've always done groups, and but they've usually been in addition to the individual work that I've done over the years. So I've done many groups, but because I see this as such a powerful way for people to grow, I am taking a leap of faith and deciding group is really where the primary work is that I want to be doing. So part of what I'm doing is podcasts and putting myself out there in a new and different way. Back in the day when I first started my practice, I used to go and do some public speaking or workshops at gyms and churches and synagogues and PTA meetings and things like that. And that was a way that people would get to know me. And that was a way that I built my practice back then. So coming back into a new practice for myself, the world is so different right now. And so I
Mhm.
have been doing some Instagram videos and TikTok videos. They're the same videos, but just working towards building community. That's my goal, is to build some community, to help people have other ways to get to know me and hopefully feel some trust towards me so that there can be a smoother process going into the groups. Up until now, it's been very similar to what I described with my therapist way back when. She talked me into it, and because
Mhm.
I trusted her, I said yes. And that's been the way most of my groups have been, that people will work with me or at least meet with me and feel like there's enough trust there that they will take that leap of faith into the group format. But my dream is to have more community where people start to trust that my community is a safe space
Mhm.
and that they can come together and connect with other people on a similar journey, because I do feel like it's so powerful to connect to other human beings from this inside, more raw place. We do it so rarely. And
Mhm.
I think as a therapist, I have such a privileged relationship with so many people because they share these very intimate things with me, but they're protective of it. And it feels like maybe unsafe to share it with other people.
Yeah.
And so I love when group starts to happen and these relationships do form in group, there is a similar safe feeling with each other. And that is
Mhm.
such a beautiful thing to be able to see people experience with each other.
Absolutely. I agree. It is a powerful process, and especially if you can sustain the group membership over a period of time. I do a lot of groups, but oftentimes it's one time with the same group of people, and then the next time I facilitate the group, it's a completely different group of people. um, and it's hard to create the that cohesion in order to get to that safety
Mhm.
place sometimes. So having that ability to keep people in the group for a longer period of time so that that depth work can really unfold, I think is so important. What's your strategy for doing that in your practice?
You mean having the groups go longer so that those
Yeah.
relationships build? I've actually done groups in so many different ways. I've done time limited groups, I've done ongoing groups, I've done it in that the group sort of stays and we don't have new people join an
Mhm.
existing group. Um, and I think the way that has worked the best for me and the groups that I've done that I'm coming back to is the idea of having the group be ongoing.
Mm, mhm,
And but of course people are in different places in their journeys in their lives, and so that does mean that people can join the group for a period of time, and if they're ready to leave the group they may leave the group and new people might join, which gets a little tricky with some of the relationships because some people do have these ongoing relationships, but then if somebody new is coming in it can be a little hard to navigate. The way I see group is it's a microcosm of what happens outside of group.
mhm,
So if you're somebody new coming into an existing group, that reflects some similar patterns that can happen outside of group. How do you handle that? How do you come in, be new, and start to connect to people when they already have established some connections? And
mhm,
also, if you're one of the people who have already established relationships, how do you let somebody in without maybe feeling like they don't quite fit? So that's all part of the work.
mhm,
So my strategy is really to allow the group to be ongoing and
mhm,
to work with the ebbs and flows in this. This is part of the work and life
mhm.
focus. And yeah, so that's what I'm doing.
So kind of structuring it so that they commit to a short time frame with the ability to recommit to another short time frame, and it just keeps rolling. Um,
Yeah,
this,
I ask that all the I really ask that people make a more ongoing commitment, but technically I ask that they commit to a month at a time.
mhm,
Um, that's sort of the time frame that I'm working with. But part of the conversation is group really needs to be longer than a month for you to start to get some of the benefits. So that's part of what I talk to people coming into the group. It's not that it's really just a month that I want people to commit to, but at the very minimum, you're coming in and each time you re-up, it's a month.
Mhm, mhm,
So that's how I envision
mhm,
the uh, the group commitment. But the length of time, it varies. Some people are committed and love it and feel very supported right away. Other people have a bit more of a struggle with
mhm,
some of the feeling connected or maybe not feeling as connected as they want to feel and not sure how to navigate some of that. So I also do some of my individual work very much around what comes up in group and to help them process what comes up in group and to identify what the work might be to bring back to group. So if they're struggling with connection, but they struggle with connection outside of group, how can this group experience be a little bit different then? So
mhm, mhm,
it's there, there's a lot of different directions that we kind of work on at once.
mhm. No, it sounds wonderful. And I think it's helpful to share that for other people that do want to be able to do group work and private practice, but aren't necessarily sure, if most of us come from working in community agencies or nonprofits where you can set up a group and people are going to come, and it's not your responsibility really to kind of fill the group. That's happening, but once you're in practice on your own, how to be able to talk with clients about that and how to be able to get them to commit to the process and structure that so that it can be successful and fluid, is really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, it has been tricky. And over the years, I've learned various things. I've had the experience that you just described of running 3 groups a day that were all sort of filled for me. So, exactly that for sure.
Mhm,
Um, yeah. And just even part of what I offer to people as well is a free discovery session for anybody that's thinking about group but not really sure if it's the right fit for them and not quite sure how they're going to get their needs met for group. I think sometimes people worry, oh, but if we're talking about other people's stuff, how am I going to get my needs met? So that
mhm.
free discovery session is a chance to really talk it through with people who are maybe on the fence or feeling a little afraid of it, and I can help them understand the process.
Excellent, excellent. And how do you think putting yourself out there in these new ways in terms of like marketing, you talked about really taking to video on Instagram and TikTok. Um, how how is putting yourself out there in those ways benefiting your practice?
Well, we shall see. I think what's happening now, or where I'm at in my own process with it, because it's new and it's kind of scary. I didn't typically like my photograph taken, so here I am now videotaping myself on a regular basis. Um, so my intention is to start to do some offerings in those spaces so that as my community continues to grow, I can connect to people in not a full on group, but a little group here or some similar experience. And really, my intention is to build trust so people can get to know some of the ways that I think about mental health because I offer a lot of mental health tips. It is a little tricky because I love group and want to talk about group. I'm not quite sure what kind of videos can demonstrate that while protecting people's
Mm,
privacy. So I'm keeping that in mind. I might be figuring out a way that I can be each character in group and offer something up about that. That's kind of in the workings of my
I
mind.
I was thinking that when you had said it, and that was because I was scrolling through something last night, and somebody had done something like that, and it was like they were the person asking the question that the customer might ask about their concerns for starting or how it works and things like that, and then they played both roles and kind of switched back and forth in their video, and it was really well done.
Yeah,
um
I have done some of two roles of two different people, but I haven't done a mini group yet. So, yeah, so I'll keep that in mind because I think that would be helpful actually to show what it looks like.
mhm.
Yeah.
And obviously you're saying like this is new to you, doing the videos are new to you, but you do have the benefit of having a background and a profession in graphic design. How has that kind of helped you to think about this world of video based social media and marketing? um,
I,
does it help?
it does. I think that there's something for me personally very exciting about coming back to some of the graphic design roots that I had. When I was a graphic designer, it was right on the cusp of computers coming out. So I had graduated before computers became the tool. Yeah,
Oh,
right before.
wow.
Yeah. And so when I first was in my career, I used to work at Food and Wine magazine, and we were just switching over to computers. And and I developed some skills connected to that, and it was a great, but it was the only thing I knew. So when I left, I didn't grow with the times, and I didn't have the technological ability that would make graphic design so much easier. So now just knowing the tool, how to add text to videos, how to edit videos, so much fun for me. I mean, I just love figuring out how do I want it to look. I mean, I don't do anything that fancy, but how do I want it to look? Um, but also, I'm opening up to learning more programs. I want to add a more graphic element to my Instagram page and use some of the more graphic tools that people use, like Canva. I know is something that people really like. I've done it a bit, but I'm going to learn how to do that more and start to incorporate that more. So I'm excited. I feel like I'm a little bit coming home because not only am I
Mm.
coming back to the graphic design piece, but I'm also made a decision that group is why I became a therapist. It's always been this in addition part of my work, and I don't want it to be that anymore. And so, really fighting for what feels truest to me and most powerful of what I can offer to my clients. So
I
it's
love
exciting.
that. I love that. I feel like that's the beauty of being able to go out and do the work independently in our practice is we get to connect what is it that we're passionate about and how can I really amplify that as the source of my work, where in other settings we have, other expectations and rules to follow and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So yeah.
Mhm.
Um, what are the tools that you are currently using? You're not using Canva, but are you using anything specific to help you with the video editing and those kinds of things that you feel like are really accessible and kind of easy for therapists to pick up and learn and use to market themselves?
The only tool that I am using is called InShot.
Mm.
And once I learned how to do it, I feel like I can do so much with it because I can clip video. It's just been such a great tool, and I feel very confident. I know my sister wanted to do some videos. I was like, oh, I can help you with that. And that felt so good to be able to say, oh, yeah, I know how to do that. And we can do it this way or that way. And I really do have a lot of ease about, oh, if you don't like that, I can change it. It just feels so easy now that I know what I'm doing. I was not at first. I was very frustrated at the beginning when I was trying to figure out how to do it. But once I got the hang of it, it really is so helpful.
Oh, that's awesome. And is that something that's like an app on your phone, or is
Yeah.
that, yeah, wow,
It's an app for your phone. I think it's free. I don't think I paid for it. I'm trying to remember. I think it's free. And
incredible.
you can't do it on your computer, but I ended up getting an iPad because the phone is very small. So I got an iPad for the purposes of doing it, but it's been great.
Oh, that's really helpful. And that's a tool I've not heard of before. So I'll look it up and I'll put a link to the app for that in the show notes if people want to check it out.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
Canva too. Canva's great. If you haven't started using it yet, I love it. I use it all the time.
I'm excited. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So.
fabulous. And how was like going on to TikTok for you? I've heard from a number of therapists. They're like, I've tried it and it was so intimidating that I like shut it down, or it was overwhelming, or I got sucked into other people's videos that I never got around to figuring out how to make my own.
So I had never even seen TikTok before I started this process, and I didn't use Instagram for myself really. I just wished my kids happy birthday on Instagram. That was the kind of the only thing. But I like to follow people. I did like to sort of anybody that I felt offered something really helpful. I really did like to follow them. So that was as far as I had gotten with either Instagram or TikTok. I did some coaching at first. A lovely woman taught me just basics with Instagram. And then I did this other coaching group with this man who taught me how to do reels for Instagram. And then TikTok was just kind of a short step from that because I just post the same videos in both
Mm,
places. So I'm not doing anything new and different. I'm just posting the same videos in both places. And I think that just different people prefer one platform over the other. So the communities that I'm building are different. So it's been interesting. It can be totally intimidating. And I can see where it gets addictive of like trying to say, oh, how did this video go? And are people liking it? And
mhm,
that's a little bit tricky. And um, one of my videos happened to do far better than all the other ones combined on TikTok. So that was just interesting, but
mm,
so helpful to me. It was one that I spoke about pain points that so many people identified with. So as I continue forward, it's helpful to know that resonated with people so
mhm,
much. And so it's a really helpful tool. I use TikTok now to do some research just to see what are
mhm.
people responding to, how are people putting their messages out there. But I'm not a huge consumer of it. I kind of just do it for that purpose and then try to stay away because I can see how it can be so energy zapping.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. But I think that's really helpful for people that are interested in utilizing that as a platform to get some support and coaching around it of like how can you use it successfully, get those basics down, and then have a structure of you don't necessarily have to be engaging with the material that other people are sharing on there, but just monitoring how your videos are doing as a way of researching the resonance of your ideal clients that you're trying to connect with so that you can continue to clarify your message.
Yeah.
um, right, so that is really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been really helpful. And also the reverse too. Like when a video doesn't do well, I've had an interesting experience of if something does well on Instagram, it almost never does well on TikTok and vice versa. It's a weird experience where they're not matching. And I think it's somewhat random. I feel like it just the timing that it goes out, who happens to be on. And then when that energy is at the beginning, then the algorithms start to work in your favor. And it can be mind boggling. So I try not to get too caught up and just know I'm going to keep fine tuning my message and figure out what I want to say to people, and what seems to resonate as best as I can tell, and continue on that way.
Mm, yeah, I appreciate that. I really subscribe to kind of the progress over perfection kind of mindset of things, and try not to get caught up in any of any of the numbers and making arbitrary meaning based on those numbers about the value that I might be contributing with the work that I'm doing, because it's
Yeah.
easy to do that with the social media stuff, right?
So easy. It's like, in a way, it's like, oh, it can be such an immediate gratification thing. And
Hmm.
then the reverse. So it's like, oh, when it starts to move quickly, I start to feel myself getting excited about that. I'm like, all right, just, it is what it is. And just not getting caught up either way, and trying not to, like what you just said, make that mean anything about my worth in any way.
Hmm. Hmm. Like it's like almost just trusting that there is a process to all of this, and the message will get into the people who really need to hear the message.
Yeah.
That as long as you're being consistent and putting out the material, I feel like that is more important than having like a post reach, X number of views or what have you.
Yeah, I agree. And even that question of consistency is something that I'm learning how to navigate, because I think when I was going through the coaching, there was an expectation of posting every single day, which just isn't sustainable for me. And
Mm-hmm.
so for me to be able to, and I'm working on it, to figure out what does my structure in a week look like, so that I honor my own downtime, so that I do this work, but that I'm present for my clients, and all the other bits and pieces that I'm paying attention to as I continue to evolve. So, yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Consistency doesn't have to be every day, right? It could
that's
be
right.
once a week.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
It
And
could
so
be once
figuring
a
it
month,
out. Yep. Yeah.
right? So I think that's also really important for people to know that, because there is like a lot of pressure when you're seeking out advice or courses from different coaches about this is what you need to do or this is what you have to do in order to get to your outcome. But we really get to define what those things are, what we need to do based on the other part, which is yes, we're here to help others, but we're also here to create a life that's worth living for us. And if we invest so much time and effort into the have tos with all the gadgets and all the postings and all the channels, right? It can become a monster and take over our lives, which is not healthy.
Totally. And I think that really touches on the crux of my work, is how do you check inside, see where you're at, regardless of what kind of expectations there might be in our culture, or kind of pressures we might experience. Where's your truth in all of this? And
Mhm.
so, absolutely. And I love what you were really highlighting, is that having that consistency can look like many different things, and you get to decide how you want to show up in that.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an important message for people just getting started.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So I know one of the things that you had mentioned in our discussion before we recorded today was that you've also been creating a documentary. And I would love if you would be willing to talk a little bit about that process with us today.
Yeah. So I created with a lovely cinematographer and director team. Actually, this young woman grew up with my daughter. So I started this conversation with her about, oh, I think I need another professional video. Would you be interested in doing that for me? So we started that conversation. And as we talked, she started to envision more of a documentary style, which
Mm.
I didn't know whether that was a good practical decision or not, but I found myself getting so excited about that creative venture. So I kept going with her, and then she brought this man in who directed the piece, and it's only about 10 minutes long. It's not done yet, but it is the story that we talked about at the beginning about me going to group therapy and how it changed my life. So it's really that story, and then that I dedicated my life to continuing to offer this experience for other people. So that's what it is about. And I've seen bits and pieces. It's not done yet. It's almost done. I believe it'll be done at the end of April. So hopefully
Very
it'll be
cool.
done soon. But it was just an exciting experience. And they were amazing at helping me pull out my story because I don't even think I knew what story I wanted to tell. And so
Mm.
in this process, it helped me really connect to that story. And yeah, it was pretty serious. Like, I think there were 18 people on staff or what crew, I guess you call it crew, on the day that we
Oh,
shot
wow.
the major one. Yeah, we did multiple days of shooting. So it was pretty serious project, but it was fun for me.
That is serious to have multiple days, all of those people, and to come out with 10 minutes of final product.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
brings perspective of the work that goes into cinematography and stuff, right?
Amazing, really. And they were such a lovely team, this crew, like young, I don't know, in their 20s, but they were so, the way they communicated with each other and interacted with each other. It was really lovely to see it. So on so many levels, it just such a satisfying experience.
It's really cool. And I'm curious, where are you going to be publishing it? Is that going to be something that's on your website? Are you going to put that on a YouTube channel? How were you thinking about kind of gaining visibility for the piece?
It is a good question, and I don't 100% know the answer, but I think my intention is it will definitely be on the website, so that it will be there. I'm probably gonna put little clips of it on Instagram and TikTok as well, and send it out as I continue to do podcasts. I will send
Mhm.
it out to future um, podcasts that I may guest on,
Mhm.
and then I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I mean, I send it to Oprah. No, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. But I just know that it feels amazing to have this representation of my story
Mm.
and to be able to put it out there. And it's such a, actually, the young woman that's the cinematographer used the word, what did she say? It's a very, I don't know if she said digestible, but that idea that this 10-minute of video is such a quick way to really connect to somebody's stories. So
Mhm.
I think, reading a book can be an amazing experience, but it takes so much time and such a commitment. So to have this small way of being able to connect to people feels very exciting to have this as
Mhm.
an option.
Yeah, it's accessible in a way that other media maybe it isn't.
Mhm.
Um, right. And
Yeah.
and then there's the feeling piece, right, that we get when we watch a polished and produced piece of film, even if it's really short, that it does elicit that emotional response and can really foster that sense of connection. with the
Mhm.
person. And I think that that certainly could do a lot in terms of attracting people into the practice and into your group work that really resonate and that are, aligned with your message. So I think it's a really cool, like a cool process that you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah. Yep. That was my intention, was really to be able to have people develop some level of trust with me because it's my story. It's actually very interesting to me. And I was very aware when I was doing this story, coming from the stigma that I felt that I shared with you at the beginning when I first did
Mhm,
this story. And then here I am making this documentary about that story, was wild to me. So,
mhm,
and I do believe there's still stigma out there, not nearly as much as there was, but even for myself to keep going, keep telling my story, and not get hung up on that, because I feel like it's a problem for there to be
mhm.
stigma connected to us, connecting to our mental health. So
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's the other piece too, which is it's okay for us as mental health providers to share that we're human too, and that we've been doing our own work and, in different ways. And that's okay to share part of that story about ourselves.
I love that you said that. And I think that that's been such a big part of my more recent journey, just
Mhm,
recognizing in my own how I've shown up. I think I've always had this tendency in my role as a therapist to kind of button up, and I have always shared stories as I think that they're helpful in people's growth and to teach with them, absolutely. But I think I've been more careful than I need to be. And that I think is just good for us as a culture. I think, yeah, absolutely. We're human, we're doing our own work as well, or we better be, because if we're not doing our own work, we can't really do the work that we do as well as we could be. So, yeah.
mhm. Yeah, well said. Absolutely. Oh. Well, is there anything that you feel would be valuable to share with listeners that are kind of embarking on this journey too, where they're putting themselves out there and it's scary and intimidating? Um, any advice you have for them?
I think to expect that, like, of course, it's scary, intimidating. I think even me coming to talk to you today, right? So you and I have already met. I knew we were going to talk, but being a guest on podcasts is somewhat new for me. And I felt my own self get nervous about that. And
Mhm,
so helping myself know, of course, I feel nervous. How could I not feel nervous? And then just keep going and trusting that. Um, but also, I mean, if anybody wants to connect to me, or probably another clinician or coach, to connect to that person and let yourself see whether or not you can feel safe enough to go to the next step, that it's a process, and
mhm,
that if you don't get to a place where you're feeling more comfortable, maybe the fit's not great, but
mm,
to get past some of that nervousness, to take a bit of a leap of faith and go to just the next step and see how that feels.
mhm,
So,
mhm. Yeah, that kind of the growing edge,
mhm.
right?
Yeah, yeah. And what do we need to ignore as we're dealing with growth? It's uncomfortable to grow,
It
you know?
is. Yes, it is super uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I think that like when you decide, okay, I want to have a practice and I need to have customers come to me, then one, we have to strip ourselves from the field of dreams version of build it and they will come, and face the reality of like, okay, well, no, I'm going to have to really put myself out there to let people know that I've built it so they They
That's
will
right.
come. And that
Yeah.
is uncomfortable for most of us who never had to market ourselves or sell ourselves in a community agency or in an educational setting, where the clients just come and you serve the clients that have been assigned to you and you're always full, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So discomfort is part of this, and to know that and work with it, I think is the best that we can do.
Mhm. So, where can people find more information about you or to reach out and connect to you, if they would like to?
I think the easiest place for people to find me, just because it's easier to remember, is if you go to Instagram or TikTok, it's the same name. It's Tanya the Therapist, all one word. So if they start there, there's a link to my website in both places. And they can see some of my videos and certainly link to my website. And it'd be great. I would love to hear from anybody who wanted to connect.
Yeah. So, for folks that are listening, if you want to check that out, Tanya's name is Tanya. So it's Tanya, the therapist, at either TikTok or Instagram. And she has some really cool opportunities, on her website. We didn't get to talk about retreats, but she also does some retreats too.
Yep, I do retreats. Right now I'm offering retreats for people who work with me in my groups, because it's sort of a continuation and going to a deeper place with that. But I also offer customized retreats. So if you have maybe a family group or a work group or a friend group that either wants to work on having some conversations with each other, or wants to work on just their own personal growth but wants to do it together, that would be a perfect opportunity to explore a customized retreat with me. I'm doing one next weekend, so I'm really excited about it.
Mm, sounds amazing. I always hear really inspiring things from the therapists that I know that offer retreats about like how enriching and energizing they are for them, even if it's tiring, right? Because it's a little more
Yep.
intense, but like they come back just feeling really excited and energized by the work because of the depth and the transformation that's able to occur in that short period of time.
Yeah,
Um,
that transformation. And then just the connection. It's such a connecting sort of experience. I love it.
yeah, awesome. Well, I am so appreciative of you making the time to share about your work, with me and with listeners. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Raina. I really appreciate having this conversation with you and being able to be here in this space with you.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Creative Psychotherapist podcast. I hope you enjoyed um, the episode with Tanya. I really love her willingness to share about how vulnerable it feels to put ourselves out there on video. We're opening ourselves up for so much feedback. And of course, we're having to view ourselves and watch ourselves in a different way. Um, and that always brings up some stuff, you know. But I hope that it inspires you to consider how, um, really working towards that growing edge and what you're doing with your marketing can really take your practice to the next level and help you to connect in a meaningful way with the clients that are really ready to work with you or like the perfect fit to work with you. Um, anyway, thanks so much for listening. Have a great week, and we'll be in your ears next week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Creative Psychotherapist. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For show notes, downloads, and additional resources, head over to the website at www.creativeclinicianscorner.com.